It's podcadzo.
Well, cheers.
Oh, wait, let me crack this.
Oh, bro.
Oh, we gotta crack it open.
And then I have to pour it in my stein.
Such a beautiful cup, honestly.
Oh,
He is
cool.
this weird thing.
We should bring another one for
Guests?
guests, a guest stein.
So then I'm the only one who doesn't have a stein.
I have one for you. I can
You
bring
could
one.
get like a mini
No, that's okay.
boot. That would be fun.
Ooh,
Yeah,
a
that would be
boot.
Just
fun.
like a smaller boot, not the big boot.
I've thought about like bringing in a shot ski too. Could I do shots on a shot ski for the pod?
Nice.
That doesn't sound like something I would do. I'm not down with that.
You don't like shots, huh?
No. I don't think I could really do an episode after taking a shot.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you for having me, gents.
Thanks for
Thank
being
you
here.
for being here. We
Julian,
should
why don't you
probably
introduce him before
tell him
we go
who,
further?
Or yeah, we should probably tell everyone who this guy is. Ladies and gentlemen, drum roll, please. Can you put a drum roll in right now?
Yep.
Cool, thanks.
Mark.
This is Cade Wright, a.k.a. Esoteric Abstraction. He is a very out there cat. He makes, well, I'm going to let you tell him what you make, because if I try, I'm going to fuck it up. But he makes very good, very experimental electronic music, and he also makes visuals oftentimes that coincide the music or are compatriots to other people's music as well. He's a very collaborative fellow. So take it away. Let the people know who you are and what you do.
Hello, my name is Cade. I make a lot of out there music. I definitely get inspired by like Halftime and any kind of psychedelic genre where you're kind of taking like audio processing to a place where you would not conventionally be able to do it. And a lot of my stuff recently has been very focused on like being generative, where instead of like writing the drum part for a 4-bar loop, I would create like a system that would generate like the kind of thing that I would want for that part and have ways to like manipulate it and have that all there so I can like perform with it and tweak everything about a song as it's playing if I'm ever like performing that for people.
I had a question on that because I've been interested in the generative stuff lately. And the keyboardist in our band, Will Benson, does a lot of generative stuff that's really dope.
You know
that.
Benson.
I love
you
that
know
boy.
Benson. Yeah. But I was listening to your song, My Love for You, which is dope, by the way. And that's all generative, right? If I understand.
Yeah.
And you said that it was kind of inspired by thinking about your girlfriend, I believe is what you said. So what's like the process of making generative music and being inspired like that and like trying to write towards something when you're making generative stuff? Does that make sense? That's the question.
It's interesting. Like you kind of have to think about things in like minimums and maximums, or like intervals that everything can kind of like modulate in, but still be within that range of what you know you want to be for that section.
Mm-hmm.
And you can like do that for literally everything about a sound now. So yeah, it's kind of about like, for me in that track, it was like following my heart in terms of like what tones and frequencies and how to like use the effects that make me channel that feeling for love for my girlfriend, you know. And it was very spontaneous. I remember like writing it in a night, just like
And
one of
when
those
that-
nights when you just have time alone and you can just sit there and focus on your music and you just like write some shit that just hits as it is.
That's cool. That was going to be my next question, is how long the process usually is for like creating your patch and all that and finding sounds. And
Yeah, for that one it was like I probably had 6 hours that I was just dedicated to like changing all of the patches. I remember using a lot of Vital Synth and just I love a lot of the internal sounds that Ableton has in terms of like ambient droning stuff.
Yeah.
Like their hybrid reverb stuff kind of makes that happen.
Uh-huh. I haven't messed around with Ableton native stuff too much, but I used to be a big Logic boy.
Yeah.
And Logic had great stock plugins and instruments too.
Oh, yeah.
I miss that about Logic. I use Reaper now.
Oh yeah, do you like Reaper?
I do.
It's super nice.
Yeah, it's really cool. That's what we're using to record the pod right now.
Awesome.
And it's been great. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, gotta love the DAW wars.
Yes.
Which one is best?
Indeed. I think they're all great.
They're all
Yeah,
horrible.
they all have their little bells and whistles
Uh-huh.
that you can appreciate in different scenarios.
So how'd you get into all this crazy stuff?
Yeah, I was gonna say we kind of gotta. No, we don't have to dwell on the past, but we gotta back it up slightly. How do you find yourself making generative music now, and like what's kind of the road that led you here? What, musically speaking, like what has inspired you to get to this point? And like I said at the beginning, you're super collaborative as well. So like, who have you worked with that has kind of like changed your approach or shaped your viewpoint on like the kind of music that you're making now?
Definitely. Well, like, yeah, when I was young, my mom played piano, and my dad played guitar and bass, and my sister played guitar and sang. And even though all of those looked like a little different, I kind of just had this overwhelming musical influence from like the get-go.
Sure.
And like I ended up being in like concert band and jazz band and
I would say that's an
marching
above
band.
average musical household. Like,
Yeah.
every single person played an instrument. At least
Everybody,
one.
I could tell, like, because my mom made art too, like we all wanted to like capture that creative feeling and like flow state and like share that with people. And yeah, that went a long way for me. So all throughout school, yeah, I've been in like every single band class that I could possibly be in.
And how much, sorry, this is kind of like a sidestep, but how much would you say that like concert band and just like classical training influenced like what you're doing today? Because for me, I feel like that was kind of huge. Like it kind of changed the trajectory of how seriously I took music back in high school and stuff.
Yeah, like I remember like traveling and like doing a concert performance of like Disney music in California, and like that was definitely one of those moments where I was just like, oh shit, like you can be flown out to places to
Yeah.
play music.
This is pretty cool.
That is insane.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I always, yeah, even though the overall experience within that was silly and like you made a lot of friends and shit, and yeah, everybody had that goal of just like, oh, I want to be good at this and like work together with like 50 other people to create this overwhelming sound. And yeah, that like feeling changes in jazz band where you're like kind of shining a light on everybody, giving them like solo time that like is a whole different approach. So it is like contrasting, especially to what we normally hear now. Like,
Yeah.
not a lot of people are like, oh, I like listen to classical music. I mean, I do listen to classical music, but it isn't like my go-to. And
Yeah.
I just generally have an appreciation for all kinds of good music. But yeah, it's like definitely almost a motif that people use at this point, where they're like, you have that era of like classical orchestral kind of dubstep, and
Yeah.
you know, that was just like, oh, people like that crazy that like sound, you know.
So when did you get into like the more technical side of like producing music and learning how to use DAWs and stuff? What inspired that?
I remember I moved down to Aurora with just the intent of like,
Shout
yeah,
out.
making some sort of move to advance my steps into like having a music career, or like making music, or and specifically writing my own music, because that was always something that I aspired to do. I was just like, oh, there's like a real book. There's like a book of songs that are so widely known that everybody just has a book of them to know how to play them together. And yeah, I'm sure there's gonna be like some sort of electronic real book of some sort, but like, yeah, writing my own music was like a big goal for me. And so I bought Ableton and just slowly did research on different pieces of gear and had like major gear acquisition syndrome. I love that
That's
term.
good. Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, I had like back and forth of like, oh, I need this instrument, or oh, I need this MIDI keyboard or such and such mic, and I just like, yeah, am personally like very minimalistic, so I just have not like a need for a lot of the stuff people try and sell, because the market, in my opinion, for all kinds of music products are just totally drowning in stuff. Yeah. So I mean, it shouldn't really matter what you have, you know, just like doing what you can with what you have was like more my focus at the beginning, and I'm
that's part of the reason I switched to Reaper from Logic. Was I felt like I was just getting paralysis by analysis in Logic. There's too many options, too many instruments, too many sounds.
Buttons.
And Reaper appealed to me because it's stripped down, very basic.
Very
comes
basic.
with some open source
synths
and stuff that you can use.
Do you like use any of the like full effects chain oversampling? Because I remember hearing about that and being like, damn, that's awesome. Like where instead of just having like, you know, Saturn to oversampling the distortion, you can just have from the beginning to end of all of your effects chains oversampled if you want.
Yeah, no, I've not done that. I'm using Reaper just very basically, almost just like how I would use Pro Tools back in the day, where I just use Pro Tools, where it's all just, I'm treating it like an analog console almost. Which is what I wanted, just to strip it back a little bit and be real simple.
I often forget that is something you can do with it. I'm always like, oh, I'm gonna have to like buy loop back to like make this whatever mic go into whatever I'm streaming, and yeah, like, oh, I could just put it all through Logic or Ableton or Pro Tools, and it would literally function the same way. But
yeah. So what instrument did you play in bands growing up?
I played
instruments,
drums and saxophone.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I love jazz and that kind of like vibe. And eventually I ended up, you know, being in the drum line too. And
how do you find yourself on the drum line? Did someone just like approach you and be like, yo, we need a snare player? We thought you'd be the one.
Well, it was like a hierarchy, you know, like a lot of the newer people who were in the drum line, who were often like freshmen or sophomores, you would be a bass drum part.
Bass drum.
Yeah, because the parts were so much less complicated. And yeah, you would have to practice a shitload to get all of those super tight rhythms that the snare can do.
Did you guys do bass drum splits?
Yep.
That's pretty hard.
Always a disaster.
That's pretty hard. You gotta
Always
be able
a
to
disaster.
Count real good. Do you know how marching bass drum works?
No, I was gonna ask. Is
So,
that like
like-
splitting measures or
No,
does it work?
notes. You
it's-
could have like
Wow.
like you know 16th notes within 2 beats, like going from one note on each bass drum and then back. So you do like
The notes are on like the open lines of the staff.
Yeah.
And every note is a different bass drum. So if you are like the C drum, you only play when you have notes on the staff.
Damn.
So it's all about like subdividing a shitload and just like only playing like on the E of 4 or like random shit like that.
it's so confusing.
I don't think I could do that. Are you guys good at math?
No. Horrible.
I like to think I'm somewhat good.
I feel like from just any rhythm thing, you're good counter.
Yeah.
good at identifying patterns.
I'm good at
I feel like
counting.
it translates to math well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just not good at math. Like, I'm
Isn't
not
that
good at
interesting?
conceptual math.
The
I
drum
can't do, like,
isn't-
algebra or like.
Yeah, the drummer is
Yeah,
not
I
good
don't
at math, but still can subdivide.
I can subdivide.
You could do
I
anything.
can play in multiple times.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's one of the
think-
great
no,
mysteries.
I think you just didn't learn math correctly. I think if they drew more music analogies, you'd probably be a math genius.
I don't know what I mean. Like
Fractions would-
algebra and stuff in
Yeah.
drumming. I don't
No,
know if
it
that's
only-
super. I mean,
It
yeah,
only makes sense so
like,
far.
patterns.
Kind of
I'm
what
good at.
Benson's
Yeah.
doing, honestly. He's
Yeah.
kind of like, and he's using tidal cycles. You kind of like have a number be like the number of beats in the measure for this one sound to play on each beat, but then you can like, apply algebra to it essentially, and it would make so every time it loops it would just like change the length of it or however many times it's playing per beat, so you just do that shit.
Yeah,
That blows my mind.
it blows my mind too. The crazy thing about that is you have both a sense of imminent control over everything that's happening in the song, but it's also completely random and generative. So it's like you are controlling the sequence kind of, but you don't really know what's going to happen within the sequence, which is a really cool idea. And I think that that's also kind of speaks to like what you do.
Totally.
And it's kind of like it's an interesting and kind of niche like group that you find yourselves in. Like, not very many people are making like generative music. It's definitely getting more popular, but
I'm seeing some more people like get into that
totally
sort of thing, and there's the whole IDM scene, and that whole stuff lends itself very well to that unpredictability.
And I feel like it's a somewhat like collaborative and like open-ended genre. Like, it's like changing as it goes, and people are communicating
And a
lot
cool,
about
tight-knit community of like
Yeah.
people doing it.
Yeah. I'm so speaking of one of those, I'm like part of a glitch label called Point Source Electronic Arts, and we are doing like a project kind of how you said, where it's just like evolving. We have a compilation album of tracks from people who are friends and on the label and whatnot, but each edition we make a giant sample pack that you could use for the production of the next edition's songs.
Oh, sick.
And then you would then create another sample pack, and so it's kind of just this evolving DNA of music where people are taking these sounds and then just warping them and resampling them over and over again to create the new sample pack that you would use as source material for your next thing. And I think we're on like the 4th version this year.
That's sick.
Yeah, and I'm super happy about the track that I've written for it. I'm working on some super alien stuff.
That's awesome.
dope.
They're like some of the only people that I've like given them like a weird track, and they're just like, give me more.
More weirdness.
We need
Turn up the weirdness.
way more. Aye, Captain.
I could do that.
What? So, like, I mean, in an instance where you get like a comment like that, like we need more, or like a hypothetical just like adjustment you want to make, how do you like? What's your editing process? How do you go back to a track and like change it? What do you do to like bring a track? Or like
Turn
give a
up the
track
weird
more
knob.
energy, or make it weirder, or make it more normal. Like, what's your approach?
I feel like, I definitely try and ask a bunch of questions, because it's like, people kind of say kind of blanket terms where they're like, I need more analog warmth. And you're like, what the hell does that mean? But you can kind of like, as a producer, your job is literally to make that kind of discernment of what it means for something to be warm. So it's like I try and ask as many questions as possible, but often it'll be like I'm showing you very close steps that I'm taking along the way, or I'm giving you multiple takes that I feel would fit what you describe. And then like letting you pick, oh, I like that one way more. And so I'd know kind of what aesthetic more so that they're going for. If you don't even know the technical terms of how to describe what you need to happen, then yeah, you like have to take one or two trial and error steps.
Sure.
But yeah, a lot of times people are convinced of stuff that they wouldn't necessarily assume they would have been initially. So it gives you a lot of like artistic leeway to do whatever. They're not saying like, oh, I only want you to use guitar in this section, yada, yada, yada.
How, I guess this question applies for generative music and non-generative music, but how do you approach like the structure of a song? Are you thinking in conventional song terms of like, hook, verse, chorus, bridge sort of thing, or
I mean,
do you just let it flow?
yes and no. It's like because I personally try and set it up like when I'm setting up my template for what I want to have open when I open my music software. I want to leave room for as much experimentation as possible, but I do want to have the overall, like, for me, I plan ahead the mixing structure a lot more than I do the like arrangement structure. And sometimes the sounds are just too weird to really put into oh, that's a bridge.
Yeah.
But it's like, you try and have a good balance of like familiarity and playing on what people expect. So, yeah, like I include lots of subsections where it's like stuff leading up to whatever's happening next to gratify it in some way. But even making music in a linear fashion, like in an arrangement view in the DAW, I try sometimes not to do that and instead like use Ableton's session view where you're using more of like a clip or loop based production process. And it's always hard you're like, what do I start with? Do I start with the drums or do I just like start with the hi-hats or, what do I do? And like the answer for me is like, no answer is right. You just have to make that decision and as the artist take a chance on starting your song with the harmonic chords and then introducing the melody and then doing all of this stuff that you wouldn't normally do where you're like starting with drums or this or that specifically and exclusively every time you like sit down to write a song. And that's just how my brain works. Like I know some people just, especially if you play one primary instrument, you would like think of things in a way that relates to that in a rhythmic way. And so that's how you would like drive your inspiration. You're just like, oh, I came up with this rhythm, and then you put it down and have whatever happen in your mind get inspired based off of that. But yeah, for me, it's just like I will just take a chance. I'll have a freaking like French horn start the extreme metal track. I don't care.
It's very interesting. It seems like, I mean, and this is kind of an uneducated perspective, I would say, but it seems like a very rhythmic based music. It's very rhythmically driven. It seems like it would be really hard to not start in some way with like a rhythmic idea or like a rhythmic concept.
Yeah.
A foundation.
Yeah.
And the thing is like a lot of like way that I perceive things is in a rhythmic way. And so I'll find myself like creating the melodic content based off of the pitches of whatever drums or little random percussion that I'm using, and that kind of creates its own melody in itself. You know, like
And-
if you had enough toms on your drum set, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
you could literally just play the
You're being
chromatic scale,
rhythmic
and
and melodic
there are
at the
some
same
people
time.
that are that crazy.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, there's a lot of drummers who, well, not a lot, but there's definitely a group of drummers who are like as melodic as they are rhythmic, which is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that aspect of your music do you like control? Like, do you kind of let your like your percussion or your drums be like fully like randomly generative, or do you?
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
And so what I meant earlier by like how I would more likely set up my mixing architecture more than the arrangement is because like going into it, if I'm using one hi-hat at like the same strength every single hit, that is going to be an entirely different mixing process than every single time it hits. It's a completely different noise and texture and timbre and
Yeah,
loudness, and so you have to like have multiple tiers of compression and clipping or limiting, like whatever kind of result you want. You have to have like layers of that to like not totally blast one thing on the track and then have no control over it later.
Mm-hmm.
But it's you kind of just have to take so much more
like
like
percussion.
sonic content into consideration, I feel like.
Yeah. That's insane. Like, I honestly hadn't really, I mean, like, I hadn't put it in that lens in my brain yet. That makes, like, a lot of sense because when we, like, mix drums acoustically, it's kind of the opposite approach. We have, like, one sound and we do what we can to, like, make it be as uniform and consistent of a sound as possible.
Interesting.
Whereas, I mean, in generative music, yeah, depending on how weird you want it to be, you have to like cater your mixing to the track a lot.
I did
more.
want to ask what, and I guess it probably varies a lot by song, but what is generally the mixing process after you've tracked everything out? And do you master your own shit too?
Yes.
Okay, nice.
Yes.
Mhm.
So I've like been experimenting with like spectral side chaining, where essentially instead of side chaining the whole volume of the bass against the kick, I would be taking the kick or whatever group of stuff I have and just taking whatever clashing resonant frequencies are in that from the kick so that they don't clash, or vice versa.
And just compressing that with like a
And-
multi-band compressor. What do you use?
I feel like I use more multi-band compression on like my master track,
Okay.
and I always try and have like an approach of using the multi-band compressor as a single band compressor first. And like I've made my own patches like this, but there's compressors out there called like Fuse Compressor by a company called Minimal Audio, and that one has like tilt controls where you can essentially set each band however you want, but you can control the speed variably from the high end to the low end, as well as the like spectral content. So you
Okay.
can make things brighter or darker just with a turn of a knob. But I have a very like each track is its own special thing mentality.
Yeah.
But I'll take my kick and I will spectrally sidechain that to the bass and then have that be a rhythm section together and spectrally sidechain that to whatever other elements are in my track, and I kind of have it set to be literally mosaic because I feel like I'm making a mosaic of different pieces of stuff all together to create this one idea.
Yeah.
And then on each of those groups, I'll have clipping and another instance of this plugin called Golfos, which is kind of like an intelligent EQ that's based off of like pink noise, but in relation to how we hear pink noise based on the shape of our head and ears.
Right.
And so you can essentially do like resonant frequency taming and like bringing stuff back up that's kind of like being buried, and have it be like a dynamic EQ to take whatever content you put through it and try and balance it with whatever spectrum you want. And yeah, then I have that going into more clipping on the master. But I definitely, yeah, I try and treat everything very specifically. Like I'll use delay and reverbs on one channel sometimes, and then use more in return channels to kind of have unique delays and reverbs, but also an overcompassing sort of vibe and space. And then, yeah, I love using like just parallel and bipolar processing, where you would be taking all kinds of different plugins or effects and putting them on the like positive pole of a sound or the negative pole of a sound, rather than like splitting the bands of the frequency.
Benson and I were just talking about that.
Yeah,
the
we're
other day.
really,
It's
really
super dope.
insane. And have you heard of phase plant before?
I don't think so.
Okay, so I was messing around in that, and like one thing, like you essentially have to like completely clip us like one side of the sound to negative infinity, and then layer that in parallel with the opposite of that, and then you could just put whatever effects on that, and it just you can literally touch like half of the sound and like change it without sacrificing its normal content or like fidelity, and it just blends in a different way to my ears.
Damn.
And so yeah, that, and like I'll use lots of multi-band stuff, and I like using like transient processing, where you can use a gate in parallel with a reverse of that same gate, and then you can put effects on like just the transient part of a sound or the sustained part of a sound. And yeah, that kind of just gives me all of the control I could ever want.
Yeah. That's fascinating, man.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And I try to not have like too much stuff on the master,
Yeah.
because in my opinion, it's easily to overcook a mix, if that makes sense, where you just like keep adding stuff like in parallel instead of thinking like from side to side and like layering things more along the line. You would try and limit that as much as possible, and you can just pretty much limit or clip at the end and boost the input into that clipper and just stop when it starts distorting. And you just have an extremely like crisp sounding and loud mix, because you don't have like a bunch of stuff cluttering all of the in-betweens, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, like all of the most impactful stuff for me is just like, instead of having a super, super consistently loud mix, you have stuff that's loud next to stuff that's super soft. And that like makes more of an impact.
Yeah. More dynamic.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I've related with that with mastering, where at first when I like tried to master stuff I've mixed, you're so used to hearing the mix that when you get to the mastering phase, like you think your job is to make it sound different than what you're used to hearing.
I ask that people all the time, like what is mastering to you? Like, are you going into that like trying to essentially change the mix? But it's like some other people, like the person who does some of the mastering at Point Source, they asked me like, you know, if we need to, we'll ask you for the stems to essentially remix it.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many mastering engineers do that either thinking that it's still mastering or just taking an L and doing more work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, it's a fine art mastering. It's because it takes control to not like change the sound too much. That's
Yeah.
what you think. Like I said, what you think your job is just make it sound totally different and new, affect the mix. But yeah, fine art.
Yeah, I've luckily. Did you ever meet Bravo?
I think I met Bravo briefly.
Awesome. Yeah, he recently asked me to master his newer album coming soon. His name's Brav Likes Bass.
Nice.
Shout out.
It's definitely some dope halftime EDM shit.
Nice.
Hard hitting and also fairly experimental.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Shout out.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to have anything set in stone in my process.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that just is like the huge red flag for me.
No, I think that's good. And it comes across when you listen to it, honestly, that each track does feel like a new thing and a new approach, which is cool. Like when you listen through an album, which I did on his Bandcamp. Plug for Cade's Bandcamp. Go check it out. Esoteric Abstraction.
Yes.
I had more of a people who have listened to this are super music nerds by now to get through all the technical speak. But I have more of a personal question. You said you moved to Aurora to like get more into your music career. Did you like go to school in Aurora for anything, or were you like working anywhere, or was it just to move there and enter a new environment?
I was actually just like moving to like that. My whole mindset was like, I'm moving to the city to start my music career. It was absolutely not as glorious as anyone would have expected. But I was just working at DIA. And doing like fuel maintenance there and just trying to not spend all my money in the city because oh my god, stuff is expensive down there.
I live in Aurora now.
Yeah,
that's where I live.
Is it good? I was like in Cherry Creek.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was kind of the nicer area, but I was just living in an apartment.
Yeah,
like same as now essentially.
I live in North Aurora.
Oh, nice.
Like right on like the Central Park, Denver, Aurora border.
Do you take the BART a lot?
The BART?
Yeah, just the train.
Oh, like there.
Yeah.
I'll take it downtown pretty often.
Nice.
Yeah.
That was like my go-to because that shit goes straight into the airport.
Yeah, I've never actually taken it to DIA.
Yeah.
I've taken it back from DIA.
It was crazy though. Like if you
ever
fall asleep on a train like that, expect somebody to come up and just go, "Hey,
yeah,
give me your ticket."
Yeah, right.
Well, so what would you say, like, and this is kind of a loaded question, but over the years, who would you say you've like drawn like influence from, both within and out of your genre? Because I know that just from talking over the years, like a big thing for you is kind of pulling influence from other genres as well and trying to kind of bust down barriers in that sense.
Definitely. I don't know. I drive a lot of inspiration from like hip hop and R&B and like funk music a lot. Like I love funk breaks. They fit so well in halftime beats. Like, and the kind of ode to previous, EDM or other electronic styles in just like the halftime feel gives me a platform to freestyle crazy shit over essentially. And one of my bigger inspirations is like, Tipper, another guy called like Rhizomorphic.
Oh.
And I would say a guy named Genre.
Okay.
As well. I honestly could go on just naming specific artists, but I personally like have gone to a lot of Desert Dwellers shows, and they're really cool because a a lot of their music is very, spiritualistic and, very much leaning on that psychedelic experience, which I love. And like, that's a very big thing that I try and draw into my music is whatever psychedelic experiences I have had and just my general human experience here. And a lot of that stuff cannot be put into words. And, all that stuff that Desert Dwellers does is when they're doing like studio shit is very soft and yoga inspired, like mindfulness and meditation and like down tempo beats. But when you go and see them live, it's like that same stuff elevated with just this massive bass and sonic experimentation where they're taking aspects from like dub where you're just creating these changing spaces with super crazy delay modulation and like just letting that stuff ring out and play around with it. And I just could go on about the inspiration, but like personally, my parents and my sister, like they all have their own music, and I have a good friend Isaiah, 97 Dread. He makes the best rap music I have ever heard.
Oh, sick.
I would love to show you guys his music, and he just reminds me that you always want to like speak from the soul when you're doing shit like this, and how important it is to be true to that, but yeah, I could go on.
Do you ever perform live, or have you ever?
I've like performed multiple times in like a big band setting with a jazz band and concert
like
setting, but yeah, not my solo stuff.
Okay.
Starting this year, hopefully, I graduate in May.
Oh, nice.
Because I'm currently going to school.
CSU?
No, I'm going to Full Sail, which is in
I know
Florida.
Yeah, for sure.
Ironically, also Winter Park, but
yeah,
not so cold. But yeah, after I graduate, I'm just definitely gonna take a couple more big steps and create my own single member LLC so I could just make legit money. And I'm gonna start doing YouTube streams of just my general process of what I'm doing when I'm creating the songs that I'm releasing, to kind of give people this window of what I'm doing to create something they're anticipating. And then, I just want to release music every month and have people buy stuff on my Bandcamp and have a little bit go towards climate change research.
Nice.
And then hopefully create like physical format audio probably like once a year, and donate some of those profits as well to like whatever charity I feel like would be a good fun thing to do a poll for.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. But I just would want nothing more than to just be able to like write music and be like charitable in the process. And my intent is, I don't know, to kind of boycott streaming services in a way. Like, I want to make there be an option for people to be able to stream my music like on YouTube and not have to deal with ads and demonetize that. But like still, I would probably end up putting my stuff on Spotify later.
Bandcamp's a great option for now.
Yeah, and it's nice because you can let people stream a track like 3 or 10 times before they have to buy it. And you could just turn that shit off.
Yeah. No, the Bandcamp community is cool too.
Yeah, the
Bandcamp
community is super supportive.
Yeah.
When did like the visual art aspect kind of fall into play, and what's your goals for that?
Well, just thinking about my experience with marching band. You know, you're kind of as like a pixel in this screen creating these images for the crowd to enjoy.
Yeah.
And before that, I was still into electronic music, and so I was very big into like the whole gloving scene and just flow arts in general. Like I love poi. I wish I could do that shit. It takes so much.
Poi was hot.
So much
dude.
practice.
I miss the gloving days.
Yeah.
High school, you just smoke a bunch of weed and your friend just goes.
Just go into the corner. Like I've done that before, even like during band class, like going into like the small recording area where you can go and record stuff like vocals, and you know, I just turn the lights off, give somebody a light show. It's so
Those
fun.
are the days.
But yeah, like that, those two things combined totally like gave me that impression where things were moving to be like more synesthetic essentially. And you know, you got those fucking ant movies that are 4D and they got like smells at you and shit. And you got the 3D glasses on, like, you know, that in my opinion, like in some way, shape or form, like the more successful live events for music or just entertainment in general are going to be those that tick all of the boxes of our senses. You know, like the more synesthetic an experience, like the more I feel like I'm in the flow state and that meditative psychedelic state. And so like the reason why I went with Ableton as a DAW is because there's a programming environment called Max built into it. And I personally like it because I don't like to touch code. I am not that smart. But you can take, like my name, abstractions of what other people coded and connect them to build your own synths, or like I'm sure you could build like a game audio engine in Max. People have made plugins where you could literally just open YouTube in the DAW. And like, so it's literally just your imagination is the limit with that. And so I found a program that was a Max for Live device bundle, like a bunch of things that work together, called Zwobot. And it is essentially like a CDJ mixer, but for video. And so I'll often write a track or some sort of generative system and mix it and master it, and then just on my master track slap this mixer on there. And I can have, is this your water?
No, it's yours.
No, okay. I can have like a certain part of the lows or highs, and essentially it's like two EQs that you can put wherever to have certain frequencies trigger different effects.
Visual
And,
effects.
Yeah, and that is something else that I employ a lot of randomization into, where it's like every 4 beats you can have it change what video it's playing and what frame it's playing at and what direction it's playing at. And on top of that, you can have a bunch of other randomized video effects and mess with all of it live. And it's interesting because I come from that, like doing those things with my hands and all of the gloving and LED and performative aspects to that. Now I'm going and controlling all of that with hand tracking. So I just have my iPad camera, you know, track the distance between my fingers and how far away my hand is and every little aspect of my hand to control all of that stuff live and still have whatever I'm changing be random, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
It's really interesting, and it's never perfect.
Yeah.
That is the biggest thing with just like, yeah, like the mixing too, is just most of the time you got to make a choice. You're like, gotta be loud or dynamic. You got to pick.
How because I feel like this is something, especially like, I don't know, we can get caught up in our mixing process with making everything like as clean and perfect as possible, but it kind of always gets to a point where it's like we just gotta put it out. You can spend forever working on something, but it gets to a point where it's like, am I making it better, or am I just making it like a different version of the same thing?
Yeah, like for you guys, at what point are you making that decision where you're like, I'm getting diminishing returns?
And usually, for me, the mixing process happens pretty quickly. Like, I've realized the thing where oftentimes mixing, my first instinct is the best instinct.
Yeah, like the
And-
feeling.
Yeah.
The impulsive feeling.
Totally. But there's just a mental thing in it where you're like, oh, that was the first thing I did. That can't be right. It's got to be improved from here. So usually, like, the mixing process for me is starting with something pretty good and then just beating a dead horse until it sounds fucking terrible. And then slowly stripping back from there pretty close to how it was originally.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you have like that subtractive approach.
Yeah.
I like doing that sort of thing where you kind of see where the limit is so you can pull it back.
Yeah, pull back from there, yeah.
You know, that's something I do a lot just in general with clipping something is, you know, you want to just blast it so you can like see where that threshold of, oh, I'm actually hearing it being distorted right now.
Yeah.
Or it's completely clean.
With the writing and the producing itself, though, how much, like, because in my brain, something like that is like infinitely modular. Like, you can spend literally forever just making small changes to songs. Like, when do you call it? Like, when do you have like a gut feeling that tells you like this is like where I should stop with this song? Or
Yeah, that kind of goes into my plan of just releasing music every month because I want to put time into this idea and I want to be able to be destructive. You know, I don't want to necessarily be afraid to be like, oh, do I even want this kick drum, or do I even want this synth happening right now? Like, should I just completely remove it? And like sometimes the answer is yeah. You know, it could completely change the direction of how I think just working on it. And so there are times when I've written that idea, like My Love for You, in one night, or just like I've been able to sit down for 6 hours and like blast out whatever ideas I'm having. But I also, want to be able to go back and make those kinds of executive decisions because ultimately those are what the artistic decisions are going to be. You know, 99.9% of people are going to keep that hi-hat loop the same. 99% of people are going to not put that much reverb on the lead. Like the list goes on. But it's like I agree with people saying that the inspiration is very fleeting. You know, that's why I set up like templates in the way that I do, where I have the stuff that I know I'm going to use on deck, but still give myself freedom to change the rhythm and change the pitch and all of these different other aspects of it to make it so I can just lay down something super fast and be like, I like that. I'm going to keep like fleshing that out and work on it more and layer things onto it, go out and record Foley sounds and pull that into it and just whatever comes to mind, you know?
yeah, that's that's a interesting like answer and idea, like laying out the template first so that you kind of like to a certain extent are like forced to stick to it. Like, you can't like change it too much from that original idea. I mean, I don't want to like beat a dead horse, but like what in a song to song basis, what would you say like where would you say that you like get ideas from? Like, are they
Sometimes it's like you know, some crazy washing machine like going off, and I'm just like, ooh, that's a beat. We like, and I totally love textural, like palette-y sounds. You know, things that sound intimate, that like that almost give you chills, or like sounds like it tastes like something. You know, like moving more onto that like synesthetic sort of vibe. You want to have a balance of those things, essentially.
Yeah. Which I think I would say that would be like the main like through line of all your music, if there is one, is just that like textural sound, and that kind of like super edited, like modulated approach on like very organic concepts and ideas.
Yeah, you like want to take the crumbling of like rocks and stuff that you can feel and hear and sense, and like make it almost like you don't have to taste it, which is kind of crazy to think about, where you're like trying to make it so that people are having this experience even though they're not.
Yeah.
I did know, and like texture is a good way to put it, because I did notice that with your tracks when I was listening to them, is there was always like a textural element that kept drawing me back into the song. Like on My Love for You, there's kind of, I don't know the best way to describe it, but kind of like a scratchy sound that occurs pretty regularly.
Yeah.
And that always bring me back to the song when I heard it in a cool way.
Dude, yeah, that's my favorite part of that. And that's actually like on my master track, I have an effects sequencer. So instead of like layering all of these effects all at the same time and having them run in parallel or series, you can essentially sequence them on and off.
Yeah.
And so I had that mixed with spectral delay that a guy I met in Discord just randomly shared with me. And like essentially you just have all of these like literally 50 layers of like different like maximum peaking frequencies on a bandpass filter, and then like a bunch of delays on all of them, and then they're all shelled within each other. And so when I was letting that run, the overall droning ambience, I would turn that off and on to have those moments of just breaking down almost.
Yeah. So to kind of change topics, and this is kind of a weird question. But how do you define, like, what's your metric for success with the release or with the track? I'd ask it because Julian and I playing in Podcadzo, it's like a very conventional musical space. You know, we're making like rock music, and there's a clear scene, clear metrics for success. Obviously, the first thing we look for is like, you know, making stuff that we're proud of and happy to create. But after that, there's like kind of clearly defined metrics for success. But and like the whole generative scene, and you know, this is an emerging thing, and there's so many different options within, so many different outlets of like how you can present music and where you put it out and stuff. Are you thinking about it that way, like what you want to achieve with the release, or is it really just a pure artistic pursuit?
Yeah, I want things to be rooted in that pure artistic pursuit, and kind of how I want to operate just and hold myself accountable for just being creative and consistently being creative is like, I have to think a little bit.
I'll fill the gap while you're thinking.
Yeah.
I think, and this is, I think, kind of a shift in all of music, but it's cool in like generative music, and like also just kind of like the producer scene in general, and just like with all of the YouTube professors and shit like that. I feel like the industry's really shifted from like gatekeeping and like withholding secrets and stuff to just being open and sharing like all the secrets and like tricks of the trade, because I don't know. It's just like you mentioned, someone sent you your spectral decay on Discord,
I would have
right?
never found that if I wasn't just happening to talk to that one guy that one time.
Yeah, and
Like, I have never talked to that fool ever again. I'm like, where are you?
Yeah. Well, it's happening like in a ton of industries too,
Yeah.
which is like everything is becoming naturally open source. There's just this, instead of everything being proprietary and hidden and, you know, you got to pay to get the secrets, it's becoming open source. Music is definitely becoming that way too,
Yeah.
which is dope.
I feel like, yeah, that goes into perfectly with what I wanted to say. So, like, that fact alone is, like, inspiring to me. But then, like, you know, we share music, and, like, my goal ultimately is to inspire people. Like, I want to share what I'm doing. I want to release music that people want to listen to or find interesting. And like I said, I want to be charitable in the process.
Yeah.
And I want to definitely, like, show my art in a performative aspect. But that all I want to set it up so I can do it in one fell swoop, so I can keep that train of inspiration going for myself and for everybody. And yeah, that ultimately is, like, my metric for success. If you're doing what you love and you're having fun, you're being charitable, you're inspiring others, like, that to me is definitely my go-to. And I'm taking an audio production bachelor's right now, and all of the alumni that we've talked to, they all say that things start out like, essentially, you are not going to be able to bank off of your name and the work that you do right off the bat. You're going to have to, like, go and get an internship somewhere. You're going to go and have to do work for somebody else while you're doing freelance work on the side. That's your own personal, like, artistic vision. And until you get to that point of, hey, I know Cade, he's a really good, mixing engineer, and, he did the mixing on this game, but I wonder how he would do mixing this album. Like, let's call him and see what happens. Like, that sort of stuff happens all the time, and you can't necessarily expect things to look a certain way, because you could have somebody come up to you when you're working on one project doing front of house for a show, and then they have you recording their album or writing music for a film. Like, the skills are so transferable that everybody isn't saying, oh, this is the one image of what my career peak will look like. You're going to be doing all kinds of stuff, and you shouldn't limit yourself to only doing that one thing, because you could meet cool people, you could have fun. Most of all, but the main thing was them saying it never starts out like you doing only freelance work off the bat and everybody's just calling you up going, hey, I need your work, yada yada yada. That's not gonna happen. You gotta make stuff happen. But it's like, that alone makes it so you need to have the art be the success. And you need to do the most with it to make it accessible to people and change it into different mediums so different people can understand it in different ways. Like putting it in a movie or putting your song in a game. Like, it has a whole different impact.
Yeah, I think being demonstrative, like showing people what you're doing and like how you're finding your process, has always been like something you've mentioned really wanting to do, and like have that be like very central to your overall like mission. And then the charity thing as well, like always wanting to be able to like give back a portion of like your earnings, has always been something you've mentioned as well. And then I do think it's really cool, like, and not a lot of people see it this way. I know, like, at first I didn't, like, being able to pivot and do multiple things or use your skill set in multiple applications is, like, kind of what keeps you alive in the industry these days. Absolutely. A lot of people, like, on our side of things, they get into a band and they're like, this is the band that's going to, like, make it or break it. Like, I'm pursuing this one thing. We have this one vision and that's it. And most of the time those bands don't make it. Most of the time people wind up in like side projects or just having multiple different things going at once. And so I feel like that's kind of central to like being a musician or just like a producer, mixing engineer, whatever it might be in this day and age, is being able to pivot and like use your skill set in multiple different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, like one of the craziest things that I heard during my financial, like business finance classes was like they straight up were like, every single person needs at least 5 streams of income. I'm like, huh?
Yeah, that's a bit much.
I'm like, how am I gonna do that? Like, if this like successful person like is like this alumni person who's done the work is telling me this, you know, they are like the master at social media literacy, and like that's my whole thought process behind wanting to do my music writing while I'm streaming, while I'm creating those projects, and having it all snowball into each other in a good way.
Yeah.
You know,
It's crazy the need to be able to market yourself nowadays, where like Andy Warhol said, I quote it all the time, the greatest art is being good at business. That's what he said.
Yeah, like everybody wants to sit here and be an awesome beat producer, but you know, when it comes to posting on Facebook every single day about like the shit that you're doing, it's hard.
It's
Yeah.
soul sucking.
It is
truly
soul-sucking.
it's such a fucking grind.
And it sucks too that that's such a relevant like metric that's used in so many different aspects of the business. Like booking shows, you need to have strong social media presence. Getting record deals, you need to have a social media presence. Like even getting streams on Spotify, we've learned to a certain extent you need to have a strong social media presence. Like it all ties back into that. And being able to market yourself is like a skill that you're not like taught at any specific point in time, because I feel like it's something that used to be handled kind of by someone else. Like you would have someone handle your marketing, you would be sold as like a brand, but now in a very like short period of time it shifted to where you are responsible for all that yourself. And
Yeah, it's like
everyone
that's
has
not
to
even in the picture, is like, oh,
Right.
you do that.
Yeah.
You wear all the hats.
I get concerned. Well, I guess I don't really get that concerned about it, but I think about it that like a lot of the bands and artists that I've been into have a level of mystique, and they don't put too much of themselves out there. And there's a mystery to who they are as people and the process and everything. And like for me, it's when you're seeing too much of someone and they're putting too much forward on social media or whatever, it's like I've kind of lost the appeal for
Definitely,
this.
there's no like, anticipation or surprise.
And
you
sometimes
know, you expect what this brand produced.
Yeah. So you need like, and that's the other thing, that's not only do you need to be influential and prolific on social media, but you have to have like an artistic intention behind it of like fitting in with your overall
right.
Like it has to be
aesthetic or whatever you wanna
categorized.
call
You
it.
gotta
Yeah.
have your genre and subgenre.
Yeah. it's a weird time that we live in.
Well, and a lot of the time, like the social media presence becomes a lot bigger than the thing itself, I feel like.
Oh, yeah.
Like not to always harp on like the same thing everyone's already talking about, but like Taylor Swift I feel like is a really good example of it. Like people give a shit about her life so much of like what is represented through social media and other outlets, but like what she herself puts out into the zeitgeist is so minimal. It's like she's not like really that revealing of her personal life. She does like hold her cards close to her chest, but yet everyone still seems to know like everything about her personal life and like where she is at all times and shit like that. And
Social media.
those things can become too powerful like for any one person to like contain, or like group of people to have control over. And so I think we are in a good sweet spot where it's like we have a vision for like our brands as individuals and our like kind of like the images that we want to put out to the world, like the appearances that we want to make to the world. We still have full control of that. And I feel like for the most part, in the lanes of work that we do, the types of art that we make, like we're going to be able to retain that control for the majority of our careers, which is really cool. I feel like we have
I mean, I like
an advantage in that way.
10 years ago, you wouldn't have like thought that people would be encouraging you to make your own website and like distribute your stuff for free on whatever platform does that, and have literally just like the most minimal overhead to work with. Like you making deals with whoever did to distribute your stuff, like they're getting publishing royalties, like they're getting a lot. And like when you start popping and making money and all people are doing is consuming your stuff through that, like, and you start making substantial amounts, it adds up. You're like, oh, I wish I had that other 50% of my shit.
Yeah,
Right.
Publishing. You guys keep talking. I'm too hydrated.
Oh.
Well, so I did kind of want to bring it back around to your music for a second. How much of like what you or like how much of your songs are like field recordings or like shit that you capture yourself, and, or how much of your music would you like to start to incorporate that aspect?
Yeah, ever since I like started going to school, they gave me like a Zoom H5 field recorder. And before that I would just record sounds on my phone, and it isn't entirely field recordings. Like I feel for me personally, those field recordings in the most immediate sense are used for those textural aspects of like layering on to other sounds that are like transient and super dry. But there have been other times, like there's this song called Gloichtober, and Eukaryoked on my SoundCloud. They are just like purely vocal recordings that I mangled to make every single aspect of the song out of. Yeah, like if I'm trying to work fast, I definitely don't go to that extent. You know,
Right.
if I have like an idea to get out, I'm not necessarily shooting for recording stuff. And so I definitely save a lot of stuff. I'm always on the lookout for like free sample packs and stuff, but as a minimalist, I go through phases where I'm just like, shit, do I need this? Do I need this? I
Right.
don't need this. I don't need this. This hat is the exact same hat as this other one.
Which,
Like, what
yeah.
am I doing wasting this space?
I guess that kind of is a good segue into my like follow-up question, which was like, how much do you really feel like field recordings or like, you know, random samples or things like that contribute to generative music versus like other aspects of EDM? Because I feel like, and again, this could just be me being ignorant, but I feel like a lot of EDM as an umbrella term, just like bass music and electronica in general, like that kind of stuff all relies very heavily on like samples and field recordings, but like generative music doesn't really have too much of that from what I've experienced and like from what I've heard. Like there will be a field recording used in context to like you know, expand an idea of a song, but it's not really like ever a central focus in generative music, which I find super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I want to show you a few songs. One of these guys named Jim Kimchi, he is like a great example of like using Foley as the focal point, and he does like a lot of manual audio editing and chopping, where he is like printing out his whole master and then going back in and separating, warping, and cutting stuff to be a weird rhythm, and it's all just like these perfect pitched and textured Foley noises. But have you ever heard of music concrete?
Nope.
So like, yeah, talking about field recordings and like their influence on generative and experimental music, when tape was our shit, people would do experimental music with tape where they would literally find, you know, movie recordings, field recordings, songs, yada, 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 all on tape and physically cut it up and tape it together. And you couldn't hear it the entire time you're doing that. But then you would roll it through the player and hear what it sounds like. And like that sort of sampling influenced that approach of where you will go to experimental lengths to write a song without even hearing it.
That's
you know,
cool.
like, or literally take, you know, all of these samples that you're not sure how they're going to fit together and still doing it. And so that feeling is very evident. Like when I'm writing music, you know, I'm taking all kinds of things, and like even for me, something that I love doing and I did for a school project too was taking like impulse responses. Like you can field record like the sound of this room. And I remember going to Olivia's apartment garage where they parked all their cars and literally just clapped and like
Nice.
recorded the clap, and you can import that sample into hybrid reverb in Ableton and mix it with an algorithmic reverb. And that allows you to take those physical spaces and, you know, reshape their size and reflections and decay times and have more of that intimate feeling of where you're like, oh, I'm actually in a real space that I recorded for this song. Like what you're hearing is my garage.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think that gives like a lot of context back to stuff like that.
Totally. Yeah, it's like all about context. But even still, I feel like people push it with what I do. Like they'll, I mean, I've written songs where it's just like a techno banger, and then it's just like, oops, like it's trance.
Which is what I like. I mean, I think it's cool to have that like sense of unpredictability, or just like truly doing whatever the fuck you want, like whatever yields the song best, and like always being experimental, always pushing the envelope in different ways. The other thing I kind of wanted to ask is, and I guess this is just like a side question, you had previously like recorded a song with a buddy who plays guitar, a mutual friend of ours. Do you see yourself like incorporating like organic instrumentation into the centerfold in the future? Is that something that like kind of not that you've necessarily like envisioned in the past, but is that something that kind of like you got your you wet your whistle a little bit and now you're like, I want to keep doing this shit?
Yeah, definitely. Like for my business class, actually, previously we were employed to create business plans and create a hypothetical investment project that you would want to do. And, you know, a bunch of the ideas behind that were essentially to record an album for charity and have, you know, an angel investor or crowdfunding pay for the recording of it and all that. But I, you know, was like, you know, Julian, the drummer, and I talked about you and how skilled you are, how long you've been playing drums and shit, and like, you know, he cost this much, and you know, I got Benson up in there. I was like, we're gonna record Galen's drums on top of that too. You know, we're gonna have my dad be the bassist because he plays awesome bass. Like, you know, I know all of these super creative people that, like I said previously, where you need to be making shit happen that other people want to be a part of. Like, yeah, I look forward and I just see me making awesome art with all of my friends and even my family.
Hell yeah.
You know,
That's fucking beautiful.
Like, I am so excited and like confident in my skills to do that, where it's like, I know whatever it looks like, I'm going to be having fun.
That's awesome.
That's sick, man. Well, anything else to plug? Anything you want to shout out?
On Point Source, we are going to release a Genome Edition 4 here soon, and I've got another ambient chill album coming out through them. And there's another freelance artists cooperative that I'm a part of called Neuro Studio, and we just launched our music label. So if anybody wants to release music, you know who to hit up.
Right.
We got amazing visual artists to like design and make video content with, and people to distribute, mix and master your work, and we'll be able to facilitate the correct aesthetic for your audience as well. So yeah, that goes for you guys too, for real.
Right
Oh
on.
yeah, let's make something happen.
Our idea, like, kind of talking about pigeonholing ourselves into doing one thing. Like, our idea is to have a group of subsidiary labels in order to, show the right people the right music, essentially, and not be limited to, if you want to put out some shoegaze shit and you just put out an EDM banger, go the hell ahead.
That's awesome.
We're wanting to be very open to working with people and share that vision of just people getting paid right and doing really creative stuff. So
Dope, man.
Nice.
That's really sick.
Is there do you guys have like a social media page, or is there a contact?
Yeah, the website is actually just neuro.studio. And yeah, all of our like partners are on there, and we have like art from everybody, music from a lot of people. We've got like sample packs, 3D assets, lots of merch. I've got some merch on there too. Got a sweater and a fanny pack and a patch.
Nice.
That's good
so
merch.
so
Fanny
check
pack
them
is
out.
strong.
Check out the band camps. You know the vibe.
Hell yeah, dude.
And you got your own Instagram?
Yeah,
Esoteric
it's
Abstraction?
E_abstraction.
The abstraction.
Yeah.
Right on.
Nice, man.
Too many esoterics out here.
Well, dude, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Hell yeah.
Love to have you
brother.
back sometime, man. It was fun.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, everyone go check out his music, and follow the social media. And Cade, thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
for the plug.